We have been talking about vicarious trauma. We've talked about domestic violence. There's another stressor out there that I thought was important for us to talk about, which is our finances, which can be stressful on an individual, on a family basis. So I wanted to take some time to talk to some experts to talk about where we are with this economy during this pandemic and give some insights, some thoughts, and some tips for folks as we deal with this pandemic and the economy. I thought it was important because just yesterday I read a story in the Washington Post that said the United States is facing a political and economic challenge like nothing it has seen in nearly 100 years. Almost overnight, it seems, the US economy, the Post said, which just 2 months ago boasted abundant jobs and soaring stock values, has become a shambles. Here are some numbers. More than 23 million workers are without a job, and in February, just 5.8 million people lacked work. So I brought to us here at the Department of Forensic Sciences two really good financial advisors. I'd like to introduce all of you to Ms. Jacqueline Hopkins and Mr. Dave Hedrick. Again, financial advisors, and they will talk to us about the economy and some of the things that we need to be focused on as we deal with this pandemic on the financial side. Thank you very much for joining us. I want to just get right into it and ask you a question as we talked about those two other issues. How difficult is it for folks to talk about their finances? Is it a stressful thing for them?
Finance is a very stressful thing for people to talk about. It is actually one of the number one stressors that you'll see in a marriage and in a couple. And it is one of the top reasons why divorces happen. People aren't comfortable talking with finances. They're coming from some different backgrounds and different understandings, and from a generation where finance wasn't talked about. And finance is very personal. We say finance is more personal than it is finance. It's got emotion tied to it. Money has emotion tied to it. And people get very stressed when they have to talk about their money.
Okay, so let's just get right into it. Where is the economy today? What does it look like? And what is it going to look like over the next couple of months and into the future?
Right. Well, Daryl, the economy actually is strong. I mean, this is really not an economic crisis compared to 2008. It's really more of a health crisis. And really, at the end of 2019, we had some of the lowest job numbers in every economic class as far as unemployment. We had some of the best stock market returns we've had in over 50 years. So we were in a good position at that point in time. But because what we had to do is actually freeze the economy almost overnight, we took where the stock market actually was down up to 35% in less than 2 weeks. So we've rebounded from that. And actually, April of 2020 was actually one of the strongest months since 1987. So there is bright spots in the economy. But right now, what we have to do is weather the storm. And with the releasing of certain industries that are now going back to work, we're actually seeing a rebound. And actually, we're predicting that actually the third quarter of 2020 and going into 2021 is actually going to have strong economic conditions for folks.
So what do people need to know about the economy? I know you just mentioned that, but we've been fortunate that as an agency, we're still working, our folks are still working, but on the other end, maybe on the personal side, there are some issues that folks are dealing with, but you mentioned it's strong, but is there something that we need to be focused on as we move forward?
Well, really what folks have to understand is, every dollar has a destination and every dollar has a name. So if we really look at our budget, our personal budget, we have to make sure that we're making the best use of every dollar that's coming into the household. And that may mean in times like this, if there's, downturn where we actually have, extra childcare or extra money that we're spending as far as homeschooling or those kind of situations. So what can we do to make sure we stretch those budget dollars as far as we possibly can? And actually looking at how can I create passive streams of income outside of my regular work day.
Okay, so let's talk about it from our agency. We are a multi-generational workforce. We have about 5 generations who are all working together. I'd like to ask you specifically about each generation and just give me some thoughts about what each generation should be thinking about or focused on. Let's start with the baby boomers, which those who are born between 1946 and 1964.
Okay, well, baby boomers, for baby boomers, longevity is their greatest risk. They're nearing retirement. They've had a long working career, and they're starting to look towards retirement and what kind of money they need in retirement. And what's important to them is knowing their financial independence number. And this is important to all generations, particularly the baby boomers. Retirement is not an age, it's a number. It's an amount of dollars that you need to go into retirement and stay in retirement and to create a passive stream of income that you can live off of. So assessing the liquidity that they have and protecting their assets becomes important.
Okay. The next is Generation X, those born between 1965 and 1980.
Well, that generation is in a unique position because they're coming out of what the baby boomers had, because they baby boomers had a lot of jobs that actually had retirements, that actually had pensions. And it was really kind of a philosophy that was brought into the 21st century. But for most corporations and even federal government and local state governments, pensions don't exist in the same format that they did for the baby boomers. So they have to really plan and strategize differently, but also realize that they may be taking care of elderly parents who maybe didn't plan accordingly, that are in that baby boomer generation.
Okay. Generation K, those born between 1977 and 1987.
Generation K, again, they were the ones that's kind of what we call stuck in the middle, because again, they were being taught by their parents and their grandparents of go to school, get a good education, get a good job. I'll use for a personal example. My father worked for the same company for 44 years. He only filled out one job application his entire life. So that's not the model that works today. So we have to really put together a solid plan to where we know where our money is going and how it's invested, and creating those passive streams of income in retirement.
Okay. The millennials, those born between 1981 and 1994.
The millennials are one of the largest generations coming up behind the baby boomers, and they have an advantage. They have time on their side. They're still young, and they need to understand what investing and strategies look like, but understanding that it is not your grandparents' generation. Social Security looks different. Pensions almost don't exist anymore. So you have to be able to fund your own retirement. The millennials are constantly moving. About every 3 to 5 years, they're changing jobs, and understanding how to move that money in the correct way so that it doesn't create tax consequences and penalties and the things that they need that are going to be detrimental to them in the future is very key.
Okay. And last but not least, Generation Z, those born between 1995 and 2000, our youngest members of our workforce.
Well, Gen Z is that generation to where the retirement plan has actually changed 100% compared to what it was, let's say, for the baby boomers, because Gen Z is going to have to be 100% responsible for their retirement. Social Security is not going to look in the same format 50 years from now as it does today or as it did 20 years ago. So Gen Z, again, they're going to have their retirement planning is going to have to start so much sooner. And really, as soon as they're out of college, they really have to, or before, really have to look at as actually investing as much money as they can and maximizing their 401k and their IRA options.
Okay. We're talking about the finances. So we're talking about savings. We're talking about emergency funds. We're talking about investment. Let's be specific in terms of some of the family dynamics that folks may be dealing with. Again, we're fortunate enough that our workforce is working. They're doing some amazing work in all three of our laboratories. But there may be some folks who are dealing with elderly parents. There may be folks who are single parents. Those who may have a spouse, a significant other who's lost a job. What are some of the things that they need to be thinking about with the economy the way it is?
Well, for the different generations, it's going to look a little bit different. And for the different family situations,
Mhm.
single moms and single parenting is, a unique challenge in itself, because you've got generally one income coming in. So you're looking for some way to create multiple streams of income, but educating your children along the way and getting the financial questions answered that you need to have answered, not from a friend or from a neighbor that has a unique, their own situation, but from a financial professional that can really give them the best scenario for them. When you've got elderly parents or the elderly come into play, you've got to start looking at how you're going to care for them. Medical costs are going to go up. They're limited in their ability to go out and work. So again, finding ways to pull away from the non-discretionary and, you know, pull from discretionary and bring it into the non-discretionary to stretch those dollars. Every dollar has a name. So trying to understand where all your money is going to and tracking that. For couples that are coming in, they're merging generation, they're merging finances and they're merging philosophies, which is even more important. They
Right.
come from different areas and they need to understand they were educated differently because their background looks different. It's not their parents' generations anymore, but they're bringing something together. They've got to create a plan that works for them where they both understand it. They've got to generate legacy planning if they're planning on having children, and they've got to generate retirement planning at the same time. And they're looking at aging parents that they maybe need to take care of. So it's understanding each other's philosophies and working together to create a written budget that's going to work for them.
Okay. And now, Miss Jackie, I know that you have a niche, something that's very important to you, and that's the financial advising for women. What are your thoughts on some of the things that women should be thinking about at this time?
Okay, I think women is a very critical time. Women need to plan differently than men. Women live longer than men. Women are generally younger in a relationship, and they need to plan for their own retirement. If we're in a couple situation, we're planning for a couple's retirement, but we don't want to spend down all our assets for one person and then be left and have to try to figure out how to generate another additional stream of income. If you're going through that situation, you also don't want to learn in times of stress. Maybe you've had a loved one pass away and you haven't been involved in the finances. So being involved in the finances is key. 85, we know that 85% of widows under the age of 50 will lose their home in the first 12 months. So planning for that longevity that's there, the additional 5 to 10 years, typically that women will live beyond what men will live, is very critical.
Okay. Um, Last question for you. I want this to be a resource for people to follow up if necessary. But one question I know I'll be asked is if someone wanted to reach out to you for some personal advice or some information, what's it going to cost them?
Great question, Daryl. And again, our business model is different than any other advisors that are out there. Is we're here for the education purposes. We're here to give folks the tools that they need to become successful. And again, financial literacy is not taught in our public school system. It's not taught in our colleges. And again, we've mentioned throughout this interview, it's really taboo to talk about in families because it's kind of that privacy subject. So really what we want to do is to break it down for them, sit down, just have an honest conversation to where we can give them the education value they can, evaluate their personal situation, and give them some ideas. So have them feel free to reach out to us, and we'd be more than happy to have that conversation with them.
Okay. All right. Jacqueline Hopkins, Dave Hedrick, thank you so much. And Dr. Pierre, I'll turn it back over to you. Thank you.